"This self-discovery journey with my ex will help our relationship," she said, so I helped myself to a fresh start and left her frantic messages unanswered. When Riley first mentioned her plan, I was sitting at my desk in our Portland apartment, working on a logo design for a local coffee roaster, completely unprepared for what was coming. She stood in the doorway holding her phone, practically vibrating with excitement about this 3-week winemaking retreat in Napa Valley that she discovered through some wellness Instagram account she followed religiously. The catch? She wanted to attend with Connor, her ex-boyfriend from college, because apparently they had unfinished business that needed processing through grape cultivation and barrel aging. I looked up from my monitor where I'd been perfecting the curve of a coffee bean graphic, trying to process what I was hearing. Riley explained with breathless enthusiasm that this wasn't just any retreat, but a transformative experience in biodynamic farming that would help her understand their past relationship dynamics and improve her communication skills with me. She'd already researched the entire program, from the moon phase planting schedule to the meditation sessions conducted in underground wine caves, and somehow convinced herself that crafting artisanal wine alongside her ex-boyfriend was exactly what our 10-month relationship needed. I remember nodding slowly, asking clarifying questions about dates and logistics while my brain was already calculating something entirely different. As a freelance graphic designer, I'd learned to think strategically about timing and execution, skills that suddenly seemed very relevant to my personal life. Riley spent the next week diving deeper into preparation mode, purchasing organic cotton overalls and hemp sandals from sustainable fashion websites, getting her astrology chart updated to align with harvest moon energy, and attending preparatory sound bath sessions at a local crystal shop. She'd spread her research across our coffee table like she was planning a military operation, complete with printouts about soil composition and fermentation temperatures, completely oblivious to the fact that I'd started browsing apartment listings and researching storage unit rentals during my lunch breaks. The irony wasn't lost on me that while she was preparing for her journey of relationship archaeology through winemaking, I was quietly planning my own form of self-discovery that didn't involve processing shared creative energy with anyone from my past. Every evening, she'd update me on her spiritual preparations while I worked on client projects, and I'd respond with what I hoped sounded like supportive enthusiasm while mentally mapping out logistics for a very different kind of retreat. The whole situation felt surreal, like watching someone plan an elaborate vacation to a place you'd never want to visit, except in this case, the destination was emotional reconciliation with an ex-boyfriend disguised as agricultural education. While Riley attended weekly pre-retreat sessions that involved chanting over mason jars and learning about lunar harvest cycles, I was quietly executing the most efficient move of my life. She'd become so absorbed in her spiritual preparation routine that she barely noticed when I started working longer hours or mentioned needing to focus on a demanding new client project. The timing worked perfectly because she was spending most evenings at the crystal shop where they held group meditations specifically designed to prepare participants for transformative vineyard experiences. I used those hours to research remote cabin rentals in the Oregon mountains, places with decent internet connectivity where I could continue my freelance work without any distractions from relationship archaeology enthusiasts. The legal situation was surprisingly straightforward since Riley had never actually been added to our lease agreement despite living here for 10 months and contributing to groceries and utilities. She'd mentioned wanting to make it official several times, but between her irregular income from wellness coaching and my preference for keeping financial arrangements simple, we'd never gotten around to the paperwork that would have complicated my current plans. I found the perfect cabin about 2 hours east of Portland, nestled in the Cascade foothills with enough isolation to focus on my design projects and enough natural beauty to remind me why I'd moved to Oregon in the first place. The owner was a retired tech worker who'd converted his property into a creative retreat space, complete with high-speed internet and a dedicated office setup that looked ideal for the intensive branding project I'd been procrastinating on for months. On Riley's departure day, she spent the morning at her final chakra alignment session while I loaded my essential belongings into my Honda Civic with military precision. I'd already shipped my computer equipment and most important client files to the cabin, leaving behind only the furniture we'd bought together and her extensive collection of skincare products that occupied most of our bathroom counter space. The handwritten letter I left on our kitchen table explained that her journey of self-discovery had inspired me to pursue my own period of creative isolation and personal growth, which led me to realize we wanted fundamentally different things from our relationship and living situation. I made sure to include exactly 3 weeks' notice about the apartment, giving her the same time frame she'd allocated for processing her past relationship dynamics through fermentation techniques. Her vision boards remained perfectly arranged on the living room wall, covered with images of successful entrepreneurs and spiritual retreats, alongside her collection of self-help books about manifestation and conscious communication that she'd never quite finished reading. Riley's transformative winemaking experience lasted exactly 9 days before everything unraveled in spectacular fashion. I was settling into my mountain cabin routine, finally making real progress on that branding project without constant interruptions about moon phases and chakra alignments, when my phone started buzzing with missed calls and voicemails that grew increasingly frantic throughout the afternoon. Apparently, Connor's current partner Jessica had discovered his pattern of attending healing retreats with various ex-girlfriends and decided to make an unannounced appearance at the Napa Vineyard during what Riley later described as a sacred grape-stomping ceremony. The confrontation happened right there in the fermentation barn, with Jessica screaming about emotional infidelity while Riley and Connor stood ankle-deep in crushed grapes, trying to explain the spiritual significance of their biodynamic farming collaboration. Riley returned to Portland 3 days early, discovered our empty apartment, and immediately launched into what can only be described as a comprehensive meltdown documented through 17 increasingly unhinged voicemails. She accused me of deliberately sabotaging her spiritual growth by timing my departure to coincide with her vulnerable healing process, claiming I'd been monitoring her social media to execute my escape plan with maximum psychological impact. Her best friend Mia started calling me repeatedly, demanding explanations and insisting that I'd traumatized Riley during her most important period of personal transformation and relationship archaeology. The conspiracy theories Riley developed were impressively elaborate, involving claims that I'd somehow coordinated with Jessica to ruin her vineyard experience and destroy her connection with Connor. She became convinced that I'd been planning this departure for months, carefully waiting for the moment when she'd be most emotionally exposed and spiritually open to cosmic guidance about her romantic future. The voicemails escalated from wounded disappointment to genuine rage as she realized that all her belongings remained exactly where she'd left them, but her security deposit and housing situation had completely evaporated while she was learning about terroir and soil composition. She even attempted to break into my cloud storage accounts, trying to delete my design portfolio as revenge for what she termed stealing her sense of safety during her transformative spiritual journey. The irony was that while she'd been processing her relationship dynamics with Connor through organic farming techniques, I'd been processing our relationship dynamics through practical considerations like lease agreements and forwarding addresses, reaching very different conclusions about what constituted healthy personal growth and self-discovery. 2 weeks into my peaceful mountain retreat, I made the mistake of returning to Portland for my usual Saturday farmers market run, where I'd been buying produce from the same vendors for 3 years. I was examining heirloom tomatoes at my favorite organic stand when Riley materialized beside me like some kind of wellness-obsessed apparition, flanked by Connor who looked significantly less enlightened than his Instagram post suggested. She'd apparently been stalking my regular haunts, convinced that confronting me in public would force some kind of emotional breakthrough that her failed vineyard experience hadn't provided. Connor immediately launched into this bizarre speech about facilitating energetic closure between our conflicted auras, speaking in the kind of pseudo-spiritual language that people use when they've attended too many workshops about conscious communication and manifestation. He kept gesturing dramatically while talking about how our unresolved tension was blocking Riley's ability to fully embrace her authentic self and creative potential through fermented agricultural arts. The whole performance might have been impressive if Connor hadn't been wearing the same organic cotton overalls from 3 days ago and smelling like he'd been sleeping in his van, which turned out to be exactly the case. Riley's confident claims about Connor offering her temporary housing while she processed our relationship's karmic lessons completely crumbled when he sheepishly admitted that Jessica had kicked him out of their San Francisco apartment after discovering his pattern of attending healing retreats with multiple ex-girlfriends. He'd been living in his converted Volkswagen van, showering at Planet Fitness locations and eating gas station food while posting inspirational content about embracing minimalist spirituality and releasing attachment to material possessions. The supposed profound spiritual connection that had motivated their winemaking collaboration deteriorated rapidly into petty arguments about who had consumed more of the expensive vintage wine during their abbreviated retreat and whose snoring had disrupted the other's meditation practice in their shared vineyard accommodation. Riley accused Connor of sabotaging her transformation process by failing to maintain proper spiritual boundaries with his current partner, while he blamed her for creating negative energy that attracted Jessica's unexpected arrival during their most sacred fermentation ritual. I stood there holding my tomatoes, watching two people who'd convinced themselves they were on some kind of enlightened journey argue about sleeping arrangements and wine consumption like college students after a failed road trip. The farmers' market crowd was starting to stare as their voices got louder, completely destroying the peaceful Saturday morning atmosphere that I'd been looking forward to after 2 weeks of productive solitude in my mountain cabin. Riley's response to our farmers' market encounter was to launch a comprehensive digital warfare campaign that would have impressed military strategists if it wasn't so completely unhinged. She somehow obtained my client contact list and began messaging every graphic designer, coffee shop owner, and small business operator I'd worked with over the past 2 years, pitching her revolutionary relationship archaeology through fermentation consulting services. Her business proposal emails explained how traditional couples therapy was outdated compared to her innovative approach of processing romantic trauma through hands-on agricultural experiences and winemaking meditation techniques. She established an elaborate GoFundMe campaign titled Abandoned During Spiritual Awakening, featuring dramatic black and white photos of herself surrounded by empty wine bottles that she claimed represented the artistic suffering caused by my emotional manipulation and financial abandonment. The campaign description painted me as a controlling partner who had deliberately sabotaged her transformative healing journey by timing my departure to cause maximum psychological damage during her vulnerable spiritual opening. Her mother escalated the harassment by posting 1-star reviews on my business website, claiming I was unreliable and had abandoned multiple client projects to pursue selfish personal interests, which was completely fabricated since I'd actually been more productive during my mountain retreat than I'd been in months. She even attempted to report me to various freelancers' guilds for client abandonment and emotional manipulation, apparently not understanding that graphic design work doesn't fall under the same regulations as licensed therapy or medical practice. Riley tried to establish legal residency at our former apartment by forwarding mail there and conducting virtual wine tasting sessions from the kitchen, live streaming herself discussing terroir and fermentation processes while claiming these business operations proved her tenancy rights. She recruited Connor as her unpaid social media manager, having him post supportive comments on her GoFundMe page using fake accounts with names like Spiritual Warrior 2023 and Authentic Living_Goddess, praising her courage for exposing toxic masculine patterns in modern relationships. The whole campaign might have been more effective if Connor hadn't accidentally used his real Instagram account to comment on one of her posts, revealing that her primary supporter was a homeless ex-boyfriend living in a van and showering at gym chain locations while posting inspirational quotes about releasing material attachments and embracing minimalist spirituality. Riley's desperation reached truly absurd heights when she filed formal complaints with various authorities, claiming I was engaging in cyber harassment by blocking her access to shared streaming accounts that were registered under my name and credit card. She somehow convinced herself that changing Netflix passwords constituted digital abuse, while simultaneously attempting to prove legal residency through fabricated lease documents that she created using wine-stained paper to simulate authenticity and age. Connor emerged as her self-appointed holistic legal consultant, despite having no actual legal training beyond watching courtroom dramas and attending a few workshops about sovereign citizenship that he'd found through his van life social media groups. Together they produced counterfeit utility statements and rental agreements using coffee shop printers, believing that organic staining techniques would make their forged documents more convincing to property management companies and legal authorities. When I remotely disconnected the wireless internet service that was registered under my business name, Riley organized what she called a digital justice vigil, live streaming from the darkened apartment while burning sage and talking about corporate oppression until the building manager forcibly removed both her and Connor for trespassing. The restraining order hearing became a surreal experience where Riley presented her homemade wine collection as evidence of creative vandalism caused by what she termed toxic masculine abandonment energy that had disrupted her artistic process and spiritual development. She brought mason jars filled with murky liquid that she claimed represented the emotional trauma of our relationship, explaining to the bemused judge how each batch reflected a different stage of her healing journey and Connor's supportive presence during her transformation. Connor testified as her character witness, describing their vineyard experience as a sacred ritual that I had deliberately sabotaged through energetic manipulation and karmic interference, while wearing his stained organic cotton overalls and emanating the distinctive aroma of someone who'd been living in a van without regular shower access. The judge listened patiently to their presentations about relationship archaeology and fermentation therapy before pointing out that blocking someone from your own internet service and moving out of your own apartment didn't constitute harassment, and that fabricating legal documents was actually a serious crime regardless of whether they were stained with organic wine or regular grape juice. 4 weeks after the restraining order hearing, I was enjoying my most productive period in years from my mountain cabin when updates about Riley's situation occasionally filtered through our mutual friend network. She'd moved into her sister's guest room in Beaverton, where she was supposedly revolutionizing housing paradigms by rejecting traditional rental agreements as capitalist oppression, which sounded much more dignified than admitting she couldn't afford first month's rent and security deposits after spending her savings on organic cotton overalls and vineyard retreats. Connor had predictably moved on to his next spiritual adventure, emerging on social media with a new partner named Sage who owned a kombucha brewery in Ashland, posting extensively about his life-changing vineyard experience while strategically omitting any references to Riley or the dramatic confrontation with Jessica that had ended their agricultural collaboration. His Instagram transformation was remarkable, going from homeless van dweller to enlightened fermentation expert practically overnight, complete with professionally shot photos of him teaching kombucha workshops and leading meditation sessions in actual buildings with running water and electricity. Meanwhile, I'd started dating Sophia, a marine biologist who worked at the Oregon Coast Aquarium and found the entire Riley situation absolutely hilarious rather than concerning or dramatic. She listened to my stories about relationship archaeology through winemaking with the same scientific curiosity she applied to studying tide pool ecosystems, occasionally asking clarifying questions about the logistics of Connor's van-based lifestyle or Riley's fermentation business model that highlighted just how ridiculous the whole situation had been. Sophia suggested we plan a simple camping trip to Crater Lake without any former partners, spiritual healing components, or agricultural processing involved, which sounded like the most refreshing vacation proposal I'd heard in years. Riley's entrepreneurial pivot into selling energetically infused homemade wine through Instagram wasn't going particularly well, with her customer base consisting entirely of her mother purchasing bottles under multiple fake accounts to inflate her sales numbers and social media engagement metrics. She was currently facing legal action from the Napa Retreat Center for allegedly stealing several bottles of their premium vintage during her hasty departure after Jessica's unexpected arrival, which added an ironic twist to her claims about being financially abandoned and emotionally traumatized by my practical decision to prioritize my own housing stability and professional development over funding someone else's spiritual journey with their ex-boyfriend.